Hi guys, this is Ginger Bandine here at Mission Driven Data, and today is Friday, so it's time for another day of having fun with data. Today we're going to talk about a really cool SQL tool that is called Lead and Leg. I guess it's two tools. But essentially these tools let you look at data that happened before and after in the order of a table. So it could be, in this case, we're going to look at services, and we're going to look at information about a particular service and then look at the service right before that and the service right after that. And I think it's going to show some interesting things. So let's look at my little SQL query I use here to get that information. So as you can see, I just pulled this little bit of language right off the internet. That's how a lot of programmers do things, actually, if you just talk to them. So I just Googled this because I remembered this little trick from something I saw somewhere. So anyway, leg is just, you can replace leg with lead. It just means the value right before or the value right after. And all you do is you say, okay, look, you tell the query what you're looking for. You tell it how far back to look, so you could look back 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows. You say what you want it to put in the answer if it doesn't return anything, so if there was nothing before or after something. And then you say how you want to separate your data up and how you want to order it. And so down here, you can see that I've just built this little query that, first of all, groups services into types and, includes the service date. I've taken out client ID because we're not looking at any protected health information here. But we are going to look at the difference in days between, so this little thing called date diff just looks at the difference in days. You could do years, months, something else too. And then we're going to use leg right here. So this little part is just this stuff up here. So I'm just saying, look at the service date. This is the little query you use to look at service date if you're using the Credible Behavioral Health Electronic Health Record. What you want to separate your data out by. So in this case, I want to look at client, separate it out by client and by service type, and then put it in order by the service date. And then I'm going to compare the number of days between that and the current service date. So that makes a little column called last service, same type, days before, meaning what's the last service of the same type that happened that number of days before that service. Yeah, how many days before the current service did the last service happen of the same type? And then I did the same thing, but I didn't include type. So this would show any service. And then I did the same thing, but for next service. So in this case, I used lead. And I said, what's the next service of the same type and how many days after that service did it happen? And same thing of any type. And then I just included the location, the program, and the employee. And you could run this query right into SQL. So if I just Control E, this gives me all those values, which are interesting to look at. And just FYI, I've de-identified all of these things like location, program, and employee for this little sample data set. But what gets really cool is you can do some visualizations with this to really kind of see what's going on in that data. And so for that, we're going to use Power BI. So if you look on my screen here, we've got a Power BI visualization going on, which was really simple to build. I just connected it to a little table I built that has those same values you just saw in my SQL. So those same values, and what I ended up doing here is I used median instead of average. Now, if you go back to your days in school, for me at least, this was a while ago, average is where you add up everything in a column and then you divide by the number of things in the column, right? And if you recall from back in the day, sometimes that skews the data a bit. So if you have someone who got a service 2 years after another service, that 700 it's going to take a lot of 10-day services to average out against that 700-day service. So the idea of the median is it's the point at which it's the point at which half of the values are larger and half of the values are smaller. And a lot of times in our data, I find in behavioral health, the median is a better average. We'll say average, but it's a better measure of central tendency. It's a better measure of kind of where's the point in the middle of the data there. So that's what I've used here. So each of these columns represents one of those values we just talked about. So I've grouped this by the service type. And we're just looking at actually one employee's records right here. So for this employee, these are all of the no-show or canceled appointments. These are all the group appointments, and these are all the individual appointments. And this light blue is the average. I'm going to call it average, but I really mean median. The median days before a no-show. So the average number of days prior to a no-show that a person had any other type of service, and the average number of days before a no-show that they had another no-show service. Same here with average number of days forward that they had another service, and then the average number of days forward where they had another no-show service, which is really interesting. So one way to interpret this, that you could, if you were thinking about this, is that someone is probably trying different days of the week to try to find someone an appointment time that will work for them, and it's ending up working out to be about every 2 weeks they're trying to do that. But for the most part, that doesn't. There might be some folks for whom that's not working. Now, what's just interesting is how it varies. So individual treatment, if you look here, in this particular sample of data, it almost makes me wonder if I had this hypothesis that maybe folks who were the folks who were not making it to their appointments were maybe getting their appointments scheduled out further, and that was making it harder for them to remember to come to their appointment. And this data actually kind of bears that out, because the average number of days for individual treatment where people did come to their appointment is actually 8 days out, before and after, for individual treatment. So that's interesting that people are maybe getting scheduled. Now, this isn't all the data, right? This isn't perfect, but it just gives us some interesting things to think about. Also, that maybe those are folks who are getting a little more intense level of services because they're having other kinds of services that are even more frequent. Same with group treatment here for this particular set of data. The median number of days that they have in the future another group appointment are 7, and the number of days back is 7 and 4, and they're getting some type of service scheduled out. So this might be an individual who's working with folks who receive a high level of intensity of services, right? So just interesting things to look at in terms of data with that lead and lag. You can get really into some interesting patterns if you look even a little further. So here's an example where it looks like maybe this person pretty commonly schedules people out 2 weeks, right? Because their median number of days before and after each individual service is 14, which is right on 2 weeks. What's interesting here is that no-shows also have a similar pattern, and groups are a little more frequent. All kinds of ways. Here's one where maybe some folks are having having appointments scheduled more frequently, perhaps weekly, but having some longer times between no-shows. Let's undo all these filters. We can look back at everything. And, you know, there's some patterns here that you can notice right away. Like, for example, this makes sense if you've worked in behavioral health, that mid-management appointments tend to be scheduled out perhaps like 45 days, which is what looks like is about the average here. But because this data set might include follow-up calls or reminder calls, most people are getting some kind of service the day before. It makes me really wonder if that's including reminder calls. So different things that you could do to clean this data up, but just off the top of just looking at it, it is kind of interesting and gives you some ideas for new questions to ask. And that's what Data Fun Friday is all about. So we'll wrap up for today. I hope you guys found this interesting. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, or feel free to send me an email. If you like what you saw and you'd like to know when I post new videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you'd like to know more about mission-driven data, check out my website, which is missiondrivendata.com. All right, guys, until later, take care.